California became a state in 1850, and one of the first pieces of legislation was the Act for the Government and Protection of Indians. It gave white settlers, and specifically churches, the right to apprentice Indian children. What it really did was open the door to legalized hostaging, indentured servitude, and culture-crushing conversions. And the main church standing at the door ready to execute on this process, the Methodist Episcopal Church. The Methodist Episcopal Church begins its missionary efforts in California shortly after U.S. annexation. By 1851, they had arrived in Los Angeles, operating out of tent circus and rented spaces. These early Methodists worked alongside U.S. Indian agents and Protestant civilization officers, coordinating language instruction, clothing distribution, and religious conversion. Many of these were most likely the descendants of formerly hostaged American Indian bloodlines. The Methodist missionaries in this time were laying the groundwork for the future via cultural reclassification and displacement. The 1850 Act for the Government and Protection of Indians was a law that allowed any white person to obtain custody of a vagrant or orphan indigenous child. These children can then be indentured until the age of 18 as girls or the age of 21 as boys. This just became a state-sponsored slave market focused on American Indian youth. Methodist and Protestant missionaries were given preferential custody rights due to their moral character. Churches could petition judges directly for custody or training rights over these children. The Reverend Isaac Owen, an early Methodist missionary in California, oversaw dozens of native converts in the 1850s, and then he helped place them into homes under this law. These entries appear in early Methodist conference journals. Clearly, this was a continuing form of the hostaging system I've described in other videos. From their own conference reports, they have examples of Indians under care with subcolumns for age, temperament, baptismal date, in the household he was placed in. Entries would include notations like Sarah, age 15, baptized 1853, now in service to Mrs. Bishop of San Gabriel Valley, or the Los Angeles Circuit reports from 1854, which list native children sent to ranches and farms post-conversion. They are then reclassified as colored. We then have mission school registers where teen converts were rotated into settler households and assigned their economic values based on skills. They would receive $50 to $100 per year value in labor. They meaning the mission schools, not the teenage American Indians. These young converts were non-titled trust assets. Think about it again. These young converts were non-titled trust assets, right? Remember, we talked about this with the Moravians. They are then held off book by Methodist circuits, but used as guarantees of continuity for land, school, and parsonage grants. What does that mean? That means that their parents will cooperate and continue to work the land since their children are basically custodians of the Methodist trust. So this is how the hostaging system worked in place by the Methodists in Los Angeles in the 1850s. Converted youth were the bait. The parents would often stay nearby so they could visit their children, but the parents were being used as seasonal permanent labor in the fields. They weren't officially contracted or indentured, but they were constrained to the land. Church journals describe, I quote, camp families living in proximity to missions or Methodist-run ranches. These adults provided the day labor in brick making, irrigation ditches, laundry, and construction. These adults were not free laborers. They were held by the dependency. No land, no title, no child access unless they complied. An example of this is the University of Southern California, which was founded and established and funded by the Methodist Church. That's right. In their manual labor training school model promoted by the Methodist circuits, they assumed that the Indian and colored students would pay their tuition through labor. USC recruited colored and indigenous adjacent students from their mission systems, and many of these students were then used to build the campus structures or work on the affiliated farms owned by the Methodist grantors. The school's early charters even described the importance of, I quote, training the hand as well as the heart, a coded phrase for labor-based trust collateralization. So how do we know this is the fact? The Methodists actually had a trustee system, truly a rotating trustee in which men were appointed to manage Indian missions. The trustees submitted reports to the Methodist California Conference, and it would show what? The number of pupils under their care, the amount of labor performed and where, the conversion metrics such as the number of new baptisms, and the costs that were offset by youth labor. That's right, they reported the offset. The trustees listed in 1857 California Conference minutes include a Reverend W.S. Turner, a J.W. Breyer, and an N. Shumate, each responsible for, I quote, native and colored work camps near San Gabriel and San Bernardino. Reverend Breyer was assigned 23 Indian youths in 1856, housed in a converted stable where they worked in a vineyard and irrigation trenching. So hit that subscription button for $2.99 to find out the details in the next part of this story. There's way more to the LA water wars than has ever been explained. Handsome History out.